This is the Voyage Report podcast, where you get the scoop on travel. Now, the editor-in-chief of the Voyage Report, Mark Albert.
Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome. Today, we're taking you on a two-wheel adventure through Belgium. Have you ever heard of Beercycling? Sounds fun, right? Well, our guests today, frequent travelers themselves, bicycled their way through southern Belgium, enjoying the Belgian countryside and the beer. Matt and Nikki Coomer join us via Skype from their home near Green Bay, Wisconsin. Matt, Nikki, welcome to the Voyage Report podcast.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I can't wait to hear all about your adventure. So let's start with the same three questions we ask all of our guests. What has been your biggest discovery while traveling?
For me, my biggest discovery while traveling is I find it freeing in a way that we all have our daily routines through work and whatever life throws at you. And I find that when I travel, I'm able to put that in the rearview mirror and be able to get away from that and enjoy myself and to pursue passions that I otherwise wouldn't have time for.
Ditto. No, probably just the amount of knowledge and culture that I learn from every trip. And there are so many places to visit. Every time I travel, I discover from someone else that there's never too many places to travel. There's always more. And I get to every time's an adventure.
And what's the favorite place you've been? This might be kind of hard. Nikki, you're a flight attendant, right? So this could be tough for you.
I am, yes. There's so many favorites. It's hard, any flight attendant will tell you it's hard to just pick one because you get to go so many places more so than the average traveler. It's kind of your everyday life. Probably, I would say Spain is probably my favorite place to travel abroad. In the United States, actually Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I love Spain. Absolutely. Was it Barcelona or?
Barcelona and Madrid. We've been to both. And then we also went to the Canary Islands. So all of it and more.
Wonderful. Matt?
Yeah, I'd say Spain, for the same reasons that Nikki outlined. And I think domestically, my favorite destination is Hawaii. It's a tropical, exotic paradise that is technically part of the United States, but it sure doesn't feel like it sometimes.
Absolutely. Now, if we could just get the fares to Hawaii down, right? Yeah, they're always like $500 or $600. And listeners, to go to voyagereport.com/deals to see when those cheap Hawaii fares come up. And guys, what's the next place that you're traveling to?
For me, I'm not entirely sure yet. I haven't decided.
I'm hoping to go to New Zealand at the end of September. I have some friends who moved there last year, and they keep posting these updates on Facebook. Please come visit us. So I messaged them and said, I'm going to come visit you. So hopefully I can make it work. It's a long trip, but I'm crossing fingers.
If I had the time off that she did, I'd be traveling a lot more.
Oh, my goodness. I loved New Zealand. I went for my birthday a couple of years ago. And, you really feel like you're on the set of Lord of the Rings. A lot of it was obviously shot there, but it's such a gorgeous country. In fact, one of the things I did, I took a train and went all the way through the North Island and then took a ferry to the South Island and took a train all the way through that island as well. It's just absolutely beautiful. You're going to have a great, great time. What a wonderful excuse, too.
Exactly. Absolutely. It might as well go while they're still there. So
absolutely. So tell us about Beercycling. How in the world did you get this idea?
Well, it was actually my idea to start with, and I'm trying to think of how we actually found it. We'd planned to go on this tour in 2016, and the tour that we were going to do there, they wound up it was all set to go, and then they wound up having to cancel. Of course, we all remember what happened in Belgium in 2016. It was the terror attacks in Brussels, and that really cut down demand for them. So they wound up postponing a good amount of their tours. But we kept them in mind as we looked at planning out our travel for this year, and it just so happened worked. Both Nikki and I are both craft beer lovers, and Nikki's been an avid cyclist for years. I've just started getting into it a lot more, but we've looked at what would be a fun vacation for the both of us to do that reflects two of our passions, and we found this company, Beercycling, which is run by a guy from Oregon named Evan Cohen, and his partner in Holland, Hank Westlink, who's also a cyclist and hop farmer, brewer, what have you. And they have this company called Beercycling, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They lead these tours around Belgium and the Netherlands, and they're expanding in other European countries, and they're actually doing some in Oregon now too, where they lead bicycle tours and they hit different breweries and they get to do tours and see sights all along the way. And basically, they're doing beer tourism in a country just by bicycle instead of being driven around to places.
Matt wrote our guest travel column this past Sunday about his adventure. You can find it at voyagereport.com on the homepage, or just type in the word Beercycling into the search bar. That's a new one. We haven't had that word on our site before. We'll also add it to our upcoming Belgium destination page. So when he first raised the idea, Nikki, I mean, what did you think? Obviously, you're good on the cycling part, but when he said it, hey, honey, we want to go beer cycling, what did you think?
It was kind of exciting. A majority of the travel we do, we plan ourselves. So it's very time, it takes a lot of time to budget and plan a trip. It was kind of nice to propose this trip that everything is, you fly out there and everything is taken care of for you. I've never done an organized tour. And this is one that out of all the things, it's more cycling than the beer. So you're burning, I was like, well, I'm going to burn all these calories and I'm going to enjoy all of these tastings in a beautiful country I've never been to before. So it was the first time I've ever traveled on an organized tour. And now I'm wondering why I planned it all myself.
Exactly. So, Nikki, you clearly have competed in the Tour de France, so we know you're good. But just kidding, listeners. But Matt, what about you? Was it physically taxing? How much did you ride every day?
This particular tour was very taxing, and I'll preface this: they have tours for all skill levels, and the vast majority of their tours are for people at the beginning level. Like if you can ride a bike, most of their tours you can do. Most of the terrain they do is flat, and you're going from brewery to brewery, and they're doing picnic lunches and so on and so forth. The tour we did is called the Ardennes Challenge. And if anybody's familiar with the Ardennes region of Belgium, it was the area where the Battle of the Bulge took place in World War II and several key battles in World War I. It's the Walloon region of Belgium, which is the French-speaking part. It is very, very hilly. They have several well-known bike races through there. In fact, the Tour de France did come through there about a week or so before our tour. So this tour was very challenging. It was, flat stretches, as they say in their description, are rare, and they weren't kidding. We did an average of probably 35 to 40 miles a day.
Wow.
I think for the total, we did about 322 miles and a total of 22,000 feet in climbs.
Oh, my goodness.
By the end of the 9 days, my legs were dead.
I think my calves and my rear end are hurting just listening to you talk about this.
Yeah, but it was an amazing trip, and as Nikki alluded to, when you're cycling that much, there's no guilt involved when you're sampling beer or you're eating, it's calories in, calories out, right? And it was just a lot of fun, and what an amazing way to see the country.
Well, tell us about that. I mean, this is a very non-traditional way to do it, right? I mean, you could have gone on a train or rented a car or taken a group bus tour or something like that. But this is obviously really unique. There's nothing between you and the environment. It is you in the middle of the outdoors of this rural area. How was that experience?
Oh, it was gorgeous. It was beyond anything I've ever experienced or expected, because it's just, you're with a group of people and you're on a bike. So you are going through the small towns, like you mentioned, and getting to see things that you might not get to see in a car because you're going a little bit slower, except when you're going down hills. Those were fun. But you really got a sense of the community in these towns. Everywhere we went, the locals welcomed us, told us they were excited to have Americans visit their town. They're like, great. They made us feel at home everywhere we went. And the views were stunning everywhere we went. It was just very some areas were, more summits and more woodsy, and then other communities we went through were a little bit bigger and kind of had more of that metropolitan feel, but it was still kind of all really nice small towns that we toured throughout the time we were there.
I mean, I think most people, when they think of Belgium, they think of Brussels or Bruges or maybe Antwerp, and that's all in the northern part of the country. The largest city we stayed in for this trip was Liège, which is a city of about 220,000 or so, and and a fairly major city for that country in its own right. But past that, we were in small towns and in villages most nights. In fact, one night we stayed in a castle that was out in the middle of the woods, the Chateau de Grandoir, which was an amazing experience in its own right. And just to be able to to visit these these small towns and really just be a part of daily life there and see it was was pretty amazing.
They don't have any 16th century castles in Green Bay, do they? Because they don't have them here in Washington, D.C.
There's not. Green Bay was founded in the 16th century, so there's not too much here from that time that was standing. So whenever you go to Europe, and it's Belgium or Spain or France or wherever you go, you really just you kind of appreciate how young the United States is compared to the old world.
Well, in fact, I just recently went to Romania, which might not be on the top of a lot of people's list, but I found a really cheap fare, $452 round trip. And I went, and there's just like a castle on every hilltop. I mean, you really, and then, they tell you, oh, this was, built in 1210, and this one was built in 1313, and you just think, oh my goodness. I mean, we are just sort of this speck in history for these cultures that have been around for a millennium or more.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible to see and to think of these cathedrals, that you see there, these structures that you see there that have been around for centuries, and in Belgium, this area, in many cases, structures that survived, not one but two world wars.
Absolutely, and I want to talk about that because you mentioned in your article that you really rode through some very famous battlegrounds and came face to face with monuments and history along the way. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the days we rode around the Bastogne area, which is famous for the Martissan Memorial, which if you read the article, we have there should be, I included pictures that I sent to you that, of that memorial, but, there's, memorials to all 50 states, the soldiers that served, in the World War. And we also saw, a monument that was, donated, in the area where, Band of Brothers was shot. And, that story was told, and I think HBO had put some money behind that, and Tom Hanks himself had put some money behind that monument as well that you saw there. So you would see that. You would also see, cemeteries, the roadside that we would bike by, and they'd be World War memorial cemeteries that honored soldiers that made that sacrifice. So very, very poignant to be able to see that area and just read about the battle plans and the suffering and just how crucial that area was to for the Allies in late 1944, early 1945.
I think a lot of Americans are surprised to learn just how many tens of thousands of U.S. Servicemen and women are buried in Europe because of the World Wars. I remember going to Normandy last year, and which is a very somber experience. And right up there on the hilltop, on the top of those massive cliffs, is the American cemetery there at Normandy, with the rows and rows of crosses, and it's quite something very sobering. And so I would imagine being there in Belgium is sort of the same thing.
Yeah, it really was. And just to be able to see that, there were several of those roadside cemeteries that we cycled by, and and clearly, those were tourist attractions that people go to. I think on this trip, the only other Americans that we wound up running into, other than of course ourselves on the tour, was at Bastogne at the Martissan. past that, we really didn't see anyone else from the United States.
Listeners, we're going to be asking Matt and Nikki for their own travel tips for frequent and infrequent travelers a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. Matt, you also write in your guest column, and Nikki, feel free to chime in here, though, but that in that area of Belgium that you rode through, it's kind of like the Rust Belt in the U.S.
Yeah, that is at least what I took away from it. Liège, from where we started, has, you could see the hills outside the city. I've never personally been to Pittsburgh. Nikki has, a couple of times, but that's kind of what it reminded you of, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
with, the old steel mills and the hills overlooking the city, and it's now reinvented itself into more of like a high tech and medical hub, as a lot of these cities have. But throughout history, the Walloon region that we cycled through was the area where there were coal mines, there were steel mills in Belgium, and as has been the case here in the United States, when those mills shut down and moved elsewhere, there are more efficient ways of producing it. They've had to try to figure out how their economy works. And so, I kind of got that sense a little bit, as you go through those small towns where, life still goes on, but, they're obviously still trying to put together, where things go in the future for them.
Nikki, can you give us a rundown of how many breweries you went to and how was the beer?
The beer was phenomenal. It was, the craft beer scene is booming in the United States, and Belgian beers is something that I knew about, but I hadn't experienced the way I experienced it in Belgium. Typically, we went to probably 2 to 3, sometimes more. There were a lot of surprises involved with the beer, but most of the breweries we went to were some of the bigger. We went to a combination of some of the smaller, I would consider like craft breweries of Belgium that actually have a lot of hype and popularity in the United States. And then we also went to several of the Trappist breweries as well, which brought some great experiences into the brewing process, visiting the Abbey and the grounds. But each day we would probably, we'd ride maybe 10, 15, 20 miles probably, and then we would make stops along the way. And I think the best part of what we were able to do at some of those breweries is a lot of the brewmasters and the owners of those breweries were there for our tours. So there's no better way to learn about someone's beer than from the person that made it. And we were able to do that at several of the breweries we visited.
And were these mainly family-owned or companies?
I'm not certain with that. There were, most of them were small businesses, I would say. I'm trying to recall if any of them are family owned, and I'm not certain that was the case, at least the ones that we had visited. The other interesting thing about the abbeys that we had gone to, and we went to 3 of them. We went to Orval, we went to Chimay, and we went to Rochefort. And accessibility is limited at these places to a varying degree. Orval, I think, is the most accessible in being able to at least see the grounds and being able to experience that. The Trappist brewers do not open their doors to the general public very often, if at all. I think Orval is perhaps the most accessible, and they open their doors once a year. Rochefort and Chimay, you don't. I mean, you can see, in the different parts of the Abbey where they brew their beers, but they generally do not do that. From what I understand, the monks do not work in the brewery. I think that's a misconception of people. They wind up, hiring, people, as any brewery would do, anywhere in the world. What they make that beer for is to basically, pay for, the grounds at the Abbey, and to be able to, they use it to pay for charitable donations throughout the world.
Wow. Divine beer, perhaps, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. What I didn't know until I read your article, Matt, was that Belgium, and I've been to Belgium and I didn't know this either, has dedicated bike networks. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we spent a bit of time riding on the Ravel network, which it's a network of basically it's like a Rails to Trails program, so to speak. So what they did is they used abandoned railways or old rail beds, and they turned them into bike trails. And it's a really nice network to be able to use, and they're expanding it all the time. There was a stretch one day where they thought they had gotten it completed, and it was still under construction, so that made for a bit of an adventure. But we look forward to them too, especially after biking up and down hills on roads that generally on most of the Ravel it's pretty flat. So it was nice to enjoy those straightaways. But Belgium, like a lot of northern European countries, from what I hear, and I have not been to the Netherlands. Well, that's not exactly true. We picked up our bikes just over the border in the Netherlands, but haven't spent any appreciable time there. But they have very robust cycling networks as it is. You see a lot of bike lanes on streets. You see them. You see a number of paths. Along highways as well, and the motorists for the most part there are very courteous. We know very well here living in rural Wisconsin. Sometimes you're taking your life into your hands riding on the roads, whereas in Belgium. Was explained to us, cyclists are their heroes. It's the most popular sport there, more popular than soccer. So you might get a honk from a vehicle, but it's not a hey, get out of my way, buddy. It's more of a hey, I see it. You can do it. You can get up that hill. So it's a very well supported infrastructure, not just from a physical standpoint, but it's something that I think people like and enjoy, and you see people on bikes there all the time.
Nikki, you mentioned the wonderful reception that you had received from the various towns and villages and cities where you were, and the people who were there who were happy to see Americans. The State Department, as you know, has just issued a revised travel alert for Europe. So for our listeners, I'm just wondering if you can talk about safety and whether you felt safe, whether there are any precautions that you took, and would you go again, even despite this revised travel alert and unfortunately all the attacks recently, Spain and Finland and Brussels and all of those?
I think safety is really important, and definitely anytime I travel, I research a lot before and make sure I am aware of those alerts. But given that anywhere you travel, you can't be nervous or put too much thought into what ifs, because it can happen anywhere. So I would definitely go back. I mean, there's so many beautiful places to visit in the world. I really felt Belgium was safe, and you follow the regular, the safety things you should always follow, those types of tips. So just do your research, read up on the area. All of the, there's a lot of do's and don'ts with travel, depending on where you go, and just research and be knowledgeable. I'm looking forward to going back. I think we're planning a trip back to Belgium actually next year already.
Yeah, and in this particular trip, and a lot of there are other tours. You're in small towns for the most part every night. You're not dealing with much in the way of big city crime. I think I could speak for Nikki here too. I never once felt, in danger or felt that anything was sketchy. I wouldn't have, thought twice about anything.
That's really good to hear. And I was recently in Europe, and I felt the same way. Obviously, it can happen at any time, and as long as you're aware and alert, obviously that's a good tip to live by. And another one, listeners, we have at voyagereport.com under a column that says how to stay safe while traveling. The State Department offers free security alerts. They'll send them right to your email box. It's called the STEP program. You can just sign up with your dates of travel and put in your passport information, where you'll be staying, and not only will they send you security alerts for your destination, but also if something were to happen, they know how to reach out and get in touch with you. And God forbid, if there was an evacuation needed, they'd be able to know exactly where you were. So I definitely recommend it. So, Nikki, I need you to be really honest here. Did Matt keep up? I mean, how was it? You're an avid cycler, and he's not. And how do you do?
He did great, actually. I did not have an opportunity to train for this trip like I actually should have in past years. So, given Matt had went to spin class twice a week and got on the bike and trained a little bit harder than me, so I got left behind on a couple of those
Wow.
hills. I will say there were a couple times where I had a little injury, and the tour guides were great. It's a supported tour, so I was able to put my bike in there and skip just a few hills.
Yeah,
Just a few.
in the vehicle. They
Yeah.
do have they had a van for support. So this was a group we had. What was it? 11 cyclists plus the two guides.
Yeah.
So that was nice to be able to have every day. That they took your luggage from point to point, so you didn't have to worry about that. You just throw on your biking gear and hop on your bike, and you're good. And secondly, if you have a situation like Nikki had, where you pull a muscle or something, you can toss your bike in the back of the van and take you up the hill, and you'd be able to recover to ride the rest of the way.
A safety net, right?
Yeah.
Matt, you wrote that you developed a passion for cycling that you didn't know you had.
Yeah, I had been riding with Nikki a little bit, not as much as her over the past few years, but I think this was something that really kind of helped fuel my interest for it, and I did. I got out there every day for 9 days and rode, and it was challenging. Don't think when you read the description of the Ardennes Challenge that they're mincing words, because they're really not. And I kind of thought, I'm like, well, it can't be as hard as they're saying it would be. Well, it was. It was difficult,
Wow.
but it was a lot of physical exertion. But I just found it enjoyable. You come from dealing with a stressful job and whatever else that you're dealing in your life, and then all you're having to focus on is what's in front of you, and being on the bike. And I just found that really refreshing and freeing. And I've continued riding quite a bit since I've gotten back. Wound up getting a new road bike. I had been on a hybrid before that. So after riding road bikes in Belgium for 9 days, I was like, I need this because it's just a lighter frame. So, but it's been great. And as Nikki mentioned, we're looking at potentially going back there and doing some riding sometime next year. Probably not to the intense degree that we did this time around, but want to be able to do it again.
That's the ultimate endorsement, right? If you want to go back to the destination where you've been for so many days. What surprised you both about this trip? Was there anything that really surprised you, whether it be that you thought it was harder than it would be, or easier, or just how beautiful it was, or the beer? I mean, what surprised you most about the trip?
The reward of the trip. I honestly this year did not train as much as I should have. I was looking more towards the beer. So I
Right.
You can be honest. That's all right.
Just the motivation and support that we got from our tour guides, who were just so phenomenal. They were there every step of the way, and I was kind of re-inspired to come back and not only learn more about beer and now cycling, to kind of get back onto some more tours here, and maybe even more cycling tours in other countries as well. Just I'm recharged from the whole experience.
Yeah, I think that I think for me, what surprised me is just the wanting to do more of this kind of traveling. Whether it's cycling or not. And obviously a lot of it, for a lot of people, myself included, you have to have the time to be able to do those things. But I've gained a real appreciation for, I guess, slow travel, as it were. That when you really get to take the time and experience a country or experience a region that you otherwise might not have gotten to do, or just take the time to be able to do it. So often we jet in for 2-3 days at a time, and it's it's hard to get a real sense of how things are, in a place. But when you get to you know to to take a longer time and be able to do it in a way where you're not just experiencing the major sites that you would normally see, or the major city spots. I think that's just a great way to be able to do it, and something I want to be able to do more of.
In fact, one of the lines in your article that I highlighted that I thought was very poignant, which is just what you alluded to. You say this quote: "This trip was one of the best things I've ever done. You're not just jetting in and doing drive-by tourism. I felt like we got to know the area and the people." And that's so wonderful when you can actually feel like you have embedded yourself almost in the culture and in the country.
Yeah, exactly. And it does. It takes more than 36 to 48 hours. Look, I like those 36 hours columns that the New York Times does. I always try to look for them and read them because, it's an adventure, right? And sometimes that's all you have time to do. And, I get that. And, you continue to do that kind of thing. But I think if anybody has time to, take the time and explore a region or explore a destination, just take the time to do it and not worry about packing in, umpteen bazillion different things. That's the most rewarding way you can travel, at least to me.
Listeners, we're about to ask Matt and Nikki for their own personal travel tips. But first, let's answer the $64,000 question. How much did this cost?
This tour cost $2,600 a piece. What that included, it was a 9-day tour. So it included your bike rental, and gear with it. You needed a helmet, pedals if you had different sorts of shoes, or clips to be able to use. Included all lodging on the tour. Included your breakfast and lunch each day, and snacks along the way. We did a lot of eating with the amount of cycling that we were doing. It included all the brewery tastings and tours. And one of the dinners, one of the nights, and they were also able to get a couple of nights set 3-course dinners for us at 25 to 30 euros a piece, which these were gourmet dinners, and they were fantastic, and I thought a great deal for us. But yeah, it basically included all of that. Dinners most nights were on your own, and drinks after that. But I felt like we didn't spend a whole ton of money outside of what we had put down on the tour. So, and that's one of the more expensive tours they do. They also do 5 and 7-day tours, which are about half, or 3/4 of the cost of that. We priced out different cycling tours around there, and it's very competitive, and in some cases much less expensive than what I've seen.
And you can
very
choose
well done.
And you can choose your skill level.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for someone that is maybe not trained as much, or hasn't done a ton of cycling in the past, I would recommend going on one of the beginner tours first. If you're in great shape, if you're an avid cyclist, then yeah, you can probably do the Ardennes tour, and you'll be all set to go. I think that's you have to kind of determine the amount and the kind of riding that you want to do, that you're comfortable with doing. But I would encourage anybody to do it, and you can read all about Beercycling on their website. The guides are very accessible. You can contact them pretty easily, and I know they're happy to walk through the right fit for anybody.
All right, let's do some news you can use. Matt, Nikki, what are your travel tips, both for the frequent traveler and the infrequent traveler, or whether they're going cycling or they're just going on a group tour or wherever? And Nikki, you're a flight attendant, so clearly you do this all the time. You've got it down pat. What are some of your top travel tips?
Well, I think the best one I can say is don't overpack. That's probably,
right.
Well, I mean, research what you need and try and keep it. I mean, if you even can, there's a lot of fees and things like that associated with airlines, and I see people run through the airport with 3 and 4 gigantic suitcases, and it's a lot less stress if you can, put everything, depending on the trip. On an international trip like we took, you're going to have a little bit more luggage, but there are ways and different resources that you can use as far as your luggage goes to make sure that you're able to get everything into one carry-on. A lot less stress, I think, if you're able to just travel light.
Have you ever seen a flight attendant pack a suitcase? It is amazing what you can get into a suitcase for a week plus long trip. It's insane. For me, my travel tip would be to, just try to leave enough time. Don't try to, force a tight connection if you can avoid it. Just try to leave enough time, because chances are something's going to go, sideways, and you just need to leave enough time so that you can get to where you need to go and to be able to enjoy things, particularly if you're doing a longer trip like this. I'd recommend trying to get into town, long enough before so that you can, be prepared for any travel delays or cancellations come your way. And, if you're coming for the U.S., to be able to adjust your own body clock to the new time zone.
One of the first articles I ever did for VoyageReport.com was why you should never check a bag. And one of the reasons, of course, was because it forces you to pack light, and obviously deal with any aircraft cancellations or changes you have to do. But that's one of the things. You can pack light, and then you don't have to lug it around wherever your destination is.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that we try to live by. This tour was a little different where, we wound up having to check some bags to be able to do that. But, and of course, coming back, we wound up bringing some beer back with us. So you kind of have to check your bag. But yeah, if you can help it, I'm a big believer in that. Don't check a bag if you can avoid it.
Matt's column is on VoyageReport.com right now. His adventure of Beercycling, along with his wife Nikki, through Belgium. It's a wonderful article, Matt. Thank you so much for writing it for us. Matt and Nikki Coomer, thanks very much for joining us and sharing your adventure. I can't wait to do it myself.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Listeners, what do you think? Would you go Beercycling? Have you already done it? Let us know by rating this podcast, giving us a review, and sharing it on social media. We have guests every week talking about travel news and trends, so be sure to subscribe to our podcast. We'd sure appreciate your review. It helps bring more awareness to our journalism and original content. And if you have an idea for a future guest on our podcast, please reach out at VoyageReport.com and let us know. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mark Albert. Bon voyage.
You've been listening to the Voyage Report podcast. Get the scoop on travel at VoyageReport.com.